I almost said welcome to Bonehead Weekly Fun Size, but this one's the long one.
But
welcome
but
to
I did find the
Biggin.
record button.
Yes, this is part 2 of Spider-Man, and Joe found the record button.
I found it. There's a little man in a boat. I don't know who will get that reference. I'm still looking for that.
Now, when we do the agree upon episode of The Creeper next week, Joe will not find the record button.
And what do you mean by creeper? Are you talking about the comic book character? Are you talking about the Scooby-Doo villain? Or about that weed Kevin used to talk about all the time?
Remember? No.
Yes.
We're going to do an entire
creeper weed, Chad?
We're going to do an
creeps up on
entire video. Entire. Biggin.
Where do you teach?
We're doing a whole thing on the Creep from Saturday Night Live with John Waters.
That's good. That is good. So back to Spider-Man and how I can finally find the red button.
So we covered 30 years. We covered almost 30 years. No, right?
20.
Yes. No, 20.
Well, James covered 50.
Oh, yeah, because
Spider-Man didn't show up until the 60s, and he started in the 30s.
Yeah.
You see, you
gotta have the context.
God created.
What? And before, let me offend people. Before God, there was his older brother, Gerald.
Oh, Gerald, you're so weird. Sorry, it's a book I do with my kid. All right, go.
Is it Piggy and Gerald?
No, it's Gerald the giraffe. See, he can't dance, you silly fool. Oh, Gerald, you're so weird.
And so the 80s, we're going to focus mainly on. We're going to start on the 80s, and the 80s are going to focus
right over it.
Mainly on the comic books because some significant things happened to Spider-Man in the 80s.
So in the entire 80s, and what you non-comic book reading folks have to understand is the wait.
The band?
When you read comic books,
yeah,
you got 32 pages of story, and then you waited for the next 32 pages. And there was a month. February was the only blessed balm you had because it's only 28 days to wait. So when you look at the 1980s for Spider-Man, there are only 22 overarching stories told.
Okay.
Over an entire decade. Real quick, I'm going to run you from 1980 to the end of the 80s.
You're not going to all do 22, are you?
They won't take long because 1980 starts with Spider Lizard. Do you know what happens in the Spider Lizard storyline?
I'm assuming a Spider Lizard happens.
He becomes he gets infected with the lizard thing and becomes a lizard like Dr. Kirk Connors.
They did that in the cartoon too.
And guess who cures him? Dr. Kirk Connors.
Kirk Connors, that's right.
Yeah.
Connors from the Rifleman cured.
Yeah, he comes up. Oddly enough, Festus doesn't help at all. Anyway,
he was gay, wasn't he? The Rifleman.
Chuck Connors? I didn't know if he was gay. Maybe.
Was Chuck Connors? I'm googling that now.
Hold on. In Chad's world, yes.
That square jaw, that rifle. Keep going.
The next storyline in the 80s that takes us from February of 81 through April of 81 is the Frightful Four take on Spidey and the Submariner. There you go. That's the storyline. The Frightful Four were basically the evil kind of. It wasn't the Sinister Six. There were only 4 of them. Next story.
Apparently, that is a rumor that he was a homosexual. He was actually not.
And they can prove it. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Now, James.
Although there's other ones that say yes, he was gay. Who knows?
By the way, though, that's one of the things too. A lot of people were and weren't, right? I mean, there were right.
Cary Grant.
Well, allegedly, Vincent Price and there's.
I thought he was going to say allegedly Rock Hudson. No, James. Rock
Hudson was, but Cary Grant's a good example.
Yeah, Cary Grant is.
No, actually, there's rumors about Vincent Price and Cary Grant. Anyway,
well, who wouldn't? He was Cary Grant. Come think about it.
I thought you were gonna say who wouldn't. He was Vincent Price.
Well, I said come to think about it, but so the only difference between the Spooky Four and the Sinister Six is a number.
Well, no, I mean the Frightful Four aren't overly.
I'm so sorry. The Frightful Four.
They're not overly frightful. The Frightful Four. Do you know the Frightful Four, Chad?
No, I really don't.
Oh my God, they're literally like it's characters you just punch in the face. I don't know, Pace Pot Pete, maybe one of them. I don't know. Like they're all the lesser known villains. The Wizard is one of them. They're not great. Not Wizard, Chad.
No, I know the Wizard.
Are you moving along? You've only done 2 so far.
All right. So in the next storyline is the Beetle comes back and the Beetle wants revenge because he blames everything. Now, what you have to understand
Did they finally get to make up with Yoko?
No, it's Yoko actually turns out to be the real villain. No, so real quick though, we mentioned this at the end of last week. Quick recap if you're tuning in a week later and have forgotten our names. I'm Gerald. Anyway,
oh Gerald, you're so weird.
Anyway, Gwen Stacy died, and Spider-Man also has to start dating again. And so he ends up dating Deborah Whitman, and she ends up dating another guy at the same time. Spider-Man is perplexed, and so that happens, and the Beetle breaks out of jail and he wants revenge. That's the storyline that ran for several issues. Then we get the introduction of 2 characters that happened earlier in the 80s, but they come back. Cloak and Dagger, which are 2 mutants who briefly had a TV show. But they were introduced actually not in the X-Men. They were originally introduced in Spider-Man. And so they come back and you get a great storyline where Cloak and Dagger help Spider-Man fight Silvermane, who is a kind of thief and all that stuff. But it also includes the 3-parter includes Black Cat, Kingpin, The Answer, and Jean DeWolf. We jump forward. We get another mutation storyline, Joe. I know you love those.
I just was wondering, you said this would go by real fast.
If you stop interrupting, Joe. So the Tarantula was a villain that was basically a fighter that poisoned people with stuff. Well, he decides he's going to become Spider-Man, so he starts experimenting on himself. Turns out it doesn't go well. He turns into a giant tarantula. And you know what he does, Joe?
Attack New York.
No, he kills himself, Joe. Why would he attack New York? He realizes he's lost all humanity, so he kills himself. The end. Doc Ock comes back with his friend, the Owl. Nobody cares about the Owl. But Black Cat. Yes. Black Cat ends up coming back. Black Cat ends up becoming a romantic interest for Spider-Man. Matter of fact, that's the next storyline that runs from February of 1983 through March of 1985. 2 years of Spidey and Black Cat getting it on. Then
Chad?
Something happens though. Spider-Man
has a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to let James say what I'm thinking he's going to say next because he missed something in 1984. So
no,
go ahead.
They were overlapping.
Gotcha. Apologize.
Because in February of 1984 through May of 1984, Spider-Man not only is dating the Black Cat, but he has to go to space because he's on some war. But don't tell anybody, Chad, because it's a secret war. He ends up getting some new duds that are black and white and red all over. No, they're black and white. And then he comes back, and it turns out that those pajamas he's wearing are actually an alien.
Oh yeah,
and that's this alien symbiote.
I said Cinnabite.
He has such wonderful things to show you.
I said it, and clearly you all knew it, but no one was stopping to correct me.
So the next storyline after he gets back from space has to fight his own pajamas.
It fights off the Hellraisers.
One of his long-term partners that was actually feeding him information from the police force was Jean DeWolf. She was a police detective, and she ends up getting murdered. And that's the storyline that happens. And then, Joe, this is the one you should know, Joe. We should all sneak out and find the issues of these. You know what happened? What Spidey did from July of 1986 through September of 1986?
No.
He was up with you up in your Eastern Kentucky nowhere land.
Doing what? Was he shooting next to Ken?
Peter Parker is sent to Appalachia on a photo assignment by J. Jonah Jameson. And everybody in New York goes, where the heck's Spider-Man? Because obviously he can't be in 2 places at once. So people start to
Spider-Man was my dad.
A lot of people start to assume maybe he's dead, all of that stuff. And so he ends up the best part of the storyline is he ends up getting arrested just so he can have a bed to sleep in because there's nowhere for him to stay. He returns to New York and immediately gets involved in a gang war between Hobgoblin, Kingpin, several other people. The storyline, though, also includes, obviously, Spider-Man, Daredevil, and the Falcon.
Oh.
And then in 1987, Bruce, we got 2 years left, Joe. We're near the finish line.
I don't know about you, buddy, but the last time I heard 1987 would take us to, I guess that it would be about 2 years if you're not doing 90. Go.
Yeah, it would. Thanks for proving my point, Chief. Somebody hose him down. He's going to overheat. Peter Parker and Mary Jane get married. So the Black Cat thing falls through. He finally settles down with Mary Jane. And one of the most famous Spider-Man storylines is Craven's Last Hunt, where Craven the Hunter, Spider-Man villain for quite some time, is obsessed with killing Spider-Man because it's the one hunt he's never mastered. Craven ends up dying. We then have a brief storyline where Spider-Man ends up being drugged and incapacitated and placed in a sanitarium. That ran for 3 issues, has some really creepy art in it. We then get the return of the Sin Eater. The Sin Eater was a villain that basically punishes sin, not shocking. And however, he's actually Stan Carter. Spider-Man put him in prison. He comes back out of prison, but he was so heavily injured by fighting Spider-Man that he's in constant pain now. So he does what any responsible person would do in that position. He kidnaps a child and commits death by cop. Spider-Man then has to deal with the fact that he caused Sin Eater to be in so much pain that he committed suicide. There you go. We then get Silver Sable and the Wild Pack. Silver Sable is a mercenary for hire, teams up with Spider-Man. And then we get the Inferno storyline, which was a crossover with X-Men, where again the Hobgoblin comes back. And then we end up the last year, 1989, we get 3 major storyline. Venom comes back to kill Spider-Man. There's an entire plot to assassinate a bunch of politicians. So Captain America, Silver Sable, and Spider-Man team up. And the final storyline is called, it was actually a Marvel crossover across all of Marvel called Acts of Vengeance. And Acts of Vengeance actually involves Loki. Loki goes to all the supervillains and go, you know why you can't beat these superheroes, right? And they, of course, say no because they're stupid supervillains. And Loki goes, it's because your heroes know every one of your moves, all of your weaknesses. And he convinces the villains to switch who they're going to attack. So instead of, Dr. Doom fighting the Fantastic Four, he fights the event. What doesn't matter. Right. You switch it all up. And of course, Loki does it because it's entertaining to Loki to watch all these different things. And that's literally all of the 1980 Spider-Man stories boiled down into really about 7 minutes.
And the other thing you need to mention about Venom in 1988, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Venom story on that Todd McFarlane of Spawn fame was the artist. And a lot of his artwork during the Venom run is still iconic. It's just one of those more memorable, like if you look and you see like the intricate layers of the spider web. And
he called it spaghetti webbing. Yes, it looked like spaghetti wrapped around the web.
It's one of those classic images that still resonates with Spider-Man fans. So you can't talk about the 80s without talking about Todd McFarlane of Spawn fame.
Well,
because he gets more credit for Spawn than what he did for Spider-Man.
But there's a great cover that I love, and I think it's McFarlane, and it's just Venom, and he's holding Spider-Man's skull. Well, it's a skull that has a Spider-Man mask on it. If you read the comic, you find out what happened. But literally, it just it's Venom speaking, and he goes, "With great power comes great responsibility and revenge."
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just everything that is what Venom is, because Venom, again, another thing that's great about Venom and that 80s storyline, and even to today, is Venom's not a villain. He just hates Spider-Man.
Right.
Like, he will protect other people. He wants to protect the innocent. It's just that he'll use lethal means to do so, but he doesn't view Spider-Man as innocent. Spider-Man shunned him. Spider-Man hurt the symbiote. Therefore, Spider-Man's guilty.
Okay.
So that's the 80s for Spider-Man. Now we're going to get into more of we are going to talk about more about the comics, of course. There are 3 major plot points of comic books that I want to talk about, but we probably need to start talking about the beginning of the movies.
Well, the
Spider-Man
little
in the movies.
So we had the 80s cartoon, and
Yes.
it was one season, and I've actually watched them all with my kid. Now I actually kind of enjoy them.
Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Joe has told this repeatedly that he finds that enjoyable. I will be 100% honest, and I've never seen it until recently. And I am out of the 3 of us, I'm the biggest. I don't get it.
It's not bad. I enjoy it. It's not bad.
Everything about it rubbed me wrong. I don't know why.
Because it's wholesome and hokey.
Yeah.
You hate wholesome in America.
I like the Littles.
We got that. Who remembers the Littles though? Back to what I was saying. So they try. This is where we start seeing movies made out of Spider-Man, right?
Yeah.
Superman get 78. Well, they're not made yet, but this is where we start seeing the interest in Spider-Man. So what I find fascinating is that we've done episodes on them before, but the Canon group, Canon movies, they made a ton of really crappy movies. They made 3 good movies all throughout the 80s, and it's not Delta Force or I was trying to think of another one. Anything with
Delta Force.
Oh my God, Chuck Norris,
the Hero and the Terror.
They made it. And that's the reason. And if you enjoy it, good for you. But
American Ninja, God, I can't believe
Charles Bronson. They had the 2 piles for the 2 Chucks, Chuck Bronson or Chuck Norris.
Chuck Norris, yeah.
And so in the middle of the 80s, for some of our horror fans, Tobe Hooper actually signed a deal with Canon. He made 3 movies, and he ended up making 3 movies. One of those movies could have been, and I think it may have happened even more if Life Force hadn't been a flop, was that you can actually sometimes on eBay, it comes up, I haven't seen in a long time. They had mock-up posters that they were selling for Tobe Hooper's Spider-Man. Wouldn't you love to see that? I mean, it wouldn't be good.
I was going to say, I don't think it would have been very good, but yeah, it would have been interesting to see.
So Canon ends up going bankrupt. And there's this little guy who's rich as hell, and I don't know how I don't think he gets the rights. I don't know who gets the rights. This part I can't remember. But who's the next filmmaker, Chad, who gets his hands on Spider-Man?
Well, let's talk
several.
Before I get into that part, there are parts that you skipped over about the Canon acquiring of Spider-Man.
What did I skip?
So Tobe, who it eventually was going to Tobe Hooper, but there were several other directors. At one point, Arthur Poon, am I saying that name correctly?
The writer?
Well, Cyborg.
Yeah.
He was originally attached to
Albert
it. He was Albert Pune. Sorry. Glenn's going crazy on me right now. I'm sorry, Glenn. But yeah, he was attached to it at some point too. They actually had $20 million invested into this Spider-Man project. And one of the key points to know about this, neither one of them knew what Spider-Man was.
That doesn't.
They thought Spider-Man was like the Wolfman.
Yeah, Electric Boogaloo. If you get a chance, it's a great documentary about Menachem Golan and his name Globus. They're just fascinating.
Mannheim Globus? No, that's not it. The
one that looks like Mannheim is actually pronounced Menachem. I can never remember the other one's name.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, Gollum and Globus. And I'm still saying it wrong, even though Joe just said it. But no, yeah, they thought
Gollum. It's okay.
Yeah. They originally thought the movie was going to be Spider-Man gets bit by a spider and turns into a giant radioactive spider monster. And that's what they were going for. Yeah. Before people started submitting scripts. But no, so after the Tobe Hooper thing, James Cameron wanted to get his hands on Spider-Man. James Cameron actually calls it the project that got away. The one project that he wanted to do that got away from him. Now, we could go into detail. There is an 80-page treatment out there about this in his screenplay. One thing to note, there is a lot of sexual overtones. The fact that Spider-Man wakes up from after being bitten by the spider. He has a lot of like fever sexual dreams about spiders, and he wakes up completely covered in spider webs. The villains in the movie were going to be a version of Electro, and his henchman was going to be a version of Sandman. And, it was all about them fighting Spider-Man. And just to go over quickly, he kept wanting to get it done, but litigation kept preventing it. It was still under canon when he was trying to get this done. Okay. And he was trying to get the movie going, but it eventually, like I said, canon went into bankruptcy.
And he was working with Carolco at the time.
And Carolco
went out of business, right?
Yeah. And then Carolco bought the rights, and then he was going to work with them. And then after they went out, it went into litigation hell, and James Cameron just dropped out of it. He said, I can't do it no more. And that whole experience basically gave us Avatar, because that's when James Cameron said, I am not focusing on other material. I am only going to do my own thing from here on out.
Yeah.
Now, that is the brief history, and we can move on. But I do want to talk about something that is not really talked about in terms of James Cameron's Spider-Man. So when this was first going, James Cameron was offered $3 million, but they would not give him $3 million until he submitted a screenplay. Now, this is not what eventually became his idea. This was, fuck you, give me my money.
Yep.
And I want to talk about it because there are arguments about what was the worst Spider-Man movie of all time.
Mm-hmm.
If this actually got made, it would have been the worst Spider-Man movie of all time. So let's talk about who was going to be Spider-Man. In James Cameron's version, it was probably going to be Leonardo DiCaprio if things went the way that it was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And in this version of the movie, it was actually going to be a version of Doc Ock. In this version, it was called Professor Octopus, and it was going to be played by one Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Octopus, like I said, is called Professor Octopus. Peter Parker gets his powers in college rather than high school. Professor Octopus also gets bitten by a radioactive spider and sometimes calls himself Spider-Man because that's how bad this script was written. He has a henchman named Wiener for some reason.
You mean
it's a real wiener?
And Doc Ock obsessively uses a catchphrase in this James Cameron script. Okie dokie. And James, you're going to love this. So again, keep in mind, James Cameron spit out this script and submitted it. These are actual lines from his script. Some of the more colorful phrases uttered by Doc Ock. He calls his students kindless adolescents, his boss the dummiest administrator, and he calls science the study of forces. Now, I want to talk about the conflict, and then we'll move on. Do you know what the conflict of this script was, gentlemen?
No.
The conflict of the movie is Professor Octopus attempts to steal Peter Parker's physics paper to complete his scientific endeavors, destroy the world for some reason, so he can visit real God's heaven. Exact quote. So if that was the script we would have got...
Wow, why would you want to visit fake God's heaven, Chad? Jeez.
Why would God need a starship?
Yeah.
So if this proves anything, James Cameron is a talented man, but you give him his money first.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cash up front, folks. I mean, but real quick.
Been hanging out with for 20 years. James and I were actually whispering. We did a presentation once going, Checky.
Yeah.
Did you get Checky? Where's Checky?
Bialystok in blue. By the way, going along with that, Chad, did that script have any love interest for Peter Parker?
Oh yeah, it was going to be Mary Jane, and in the one that was going to get made, there was a lot of sex in that one. Like there's one scene where him and Mary Jane are on top of one of the famous bridges.
Jeff.
No, it might have been the Empire State Building. But anyway, they're on the roof and they're having they're going at it hard, and she has to keep her eyes closed because she's afraid she's going to fall off. So there you go. But it was Mary Jane.
People have been keeping their eyes closed with us for years without the assistance of a bridge.
No.
By the way, though, to your point, though, oddly enough, Chad, I don't know if it's linked, but I mean, for a while, Dr. Octopus did become Spider-Man.
Yeah, that was the Superior Spider-Man, which I would love to read, because it's just, he takes over Spider-Man and is the absolute dick to everybody. It's great.
But he even changes up love interest and everything. It really screws up Peter Parker's life.
Yeah.
Because, by the way, that's the other thing. I mean, even Mary Jane, he loses more relationships. Spider-Man has pretty much dated everybody on the planet.
Yeah.
Every female on the planet, from Black Cat, which I mentioned earlier. Obviously, Gwen Stacy died. Mary Jane, at one point, the devil makes him get divorced.
That was another one.
Not the real devil, but
that was one more day.
The robot devil.
That one.
Yeah, the robot. You tell the robot devil I'm coming. I heard him. But I mean, dated Silver Sable, dated Betty Brant, which crossovers with several other comics right there. Dated Mockingbird from the Avengers, who is also Hawkeye's ex-wife. Dated Silk, which, by the way, going back to the other point of your point, Dr. Octopus gets bit. Silk is another character that it turns out the spider bit two people, except she was basically hidden away from reality. They locked her in a room, more or less, to train her to fight against evil Spider-Man that never really happened. They did. They were clones.
Okay, so we're into the 90s. Go ahead.
So that was 1993, James Cameron Spider-Man. But 1994 saw another significant moment in Spider-Man history. The release of Spider-Man, the animated series, which is the best animated Spider-Man, in my opinion. And also, too,
I don't know. Have you seen the 80 version?
Also, Chad, it also has that great techno soundtrack.
Yeah. Spider Blood. And then one time it goes Spider Blood.
I know. Yeah.
But the Spider-Man, along with the X-Men animated series, and it changed what you could do with the animation. In particular, children's animation. It told ongoing story arcs, because up until that point, every episode was a 30-minute one-off, and then it never got revisited. It was forgotten. The villain's plot was quickly changed into something else. These were stories that were told, and then even 2 seasons later, they were referencing those that happened.
Well, and that Spider-Man cartoon was the original Marvel Cinematic Universe as far as having crossovers. Doctor Strange pops up in episodes occasionally. Iron Man. I mean, you had those characters cross over quite a bit.
Robert Hayes, I believe, was the voice of Iron Man. And then Captain America comes in. I mean, it was their version of the Cinematic
Real quick,
Universe.
for our audience, Robert Hayes, the voice of Iron, was Robert Hayes from Airplane.
Yes. And I'm trying to remember the movie with him and Peter Weller that I still absolutely love to this day. And I can't remember.
It's the 80s Spider-Man cartoon.
No, I think that was a canon film too, guys. I have to look it up, but Peter Weller and Robert Hayes did a great action film in the 80s. That's absolutely just enjoyable as hell.
So what's next?
1990, and just quickly to hash that one out, it told a lot of the same story arcs that were told in comics over multiple parts. And the one thing that kind of sucked about it is they canceled the animated series suddenly. It didn't get to end correctly. I believe the last episode is where he's swinging around with Stan Lee. It's an absolutely terrible episode. And the ultimate thing that they ended on is Mary Jane is gone. She got sucked into an alternate universe by Green Goblin and never came back. We never saw that resolution happen. It's still considered, I think, one of the biggest tragedies of television, of a series ending before it was finished.
That should actually be the cliffhanger for the next Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. They should just have her appear at the end of it and be like, if we get a part 3, you'll get the story finally.
So I'm going to backtrack. We just talked about 1994 Spider-Man, but I missed something that happened in 1991. I was going to talk about this before I went into that. 1991 did see the appearance of another iconic Spider-Man villain, Carnage.
Yeah, I was going to say, and so yeah, that's a great point because. And by the way, real quick to my point here, I said I thought it was Todd McFarlane. Eric Larson actually did the famous cover with Venom holding Spider-Man.
Oh, okay.
But no, Carnage is, and I read that entire storyline when it first came out. And you want to talk about setting something up? Like if you were geeky enough, you could tell it was coming because the scene because the first appearance of Cletus Cassady, sorry, who is the villain.
I thought it was Cassidy.
I always pronounce it Cassidy too. It probably is. Somebody said Cassidy, and I'm like, did I do it?
I'm pretty sure in the Venom movie they call it Cletus Cassidy,
dude.
And by the way, that movie's terrible.
But that being said, so when it first introduced, so Eddie Brock is in prison, and of course he's been separated from the symbiote. The symbiote comes through and bails him out. And of course they break through the wall. But as it pans away, the only person they could put as a cellmate with him was actually getting ready to shiv him is this serial killer. And the great scene, so they jump through the wall. And of course, when the symbiote jumps through, there's stuff left behind, pieces of the symbiote. But one little part of it is falling down, and Cletus Cassidy says, "I'm glad that's over." And literally, it's just one little word balloon. No, it's not. And most people automatically thought, "Oh, it's because Venom's loose." But there were enough of us that were geeky enough going, "Oh, there's something going to happen there." They did not introduce this serial killer to not do anything with it.
Right.
And so that's the entire thing. Like, honestly, the only parallel I can make is we talked about, you talk about Batman and Joker, and we actually said the Green Goblin, but in modern parlance, probably the closest to Joker is Carnage.
So you think, because I still think, so I was struggling with this earlier because I thought Joe might ask this question. So yeah, I still think Green Goblin is the Joker to Batman, to Spider-Man, and I
don't know anything about Carnage.
Well, and I feel like Venom is Spider-Man's Bane.
Yeah.
But Carnage, I could not put a finger on, other than also comparing him again to the Joker. So yeah, I agree with you. It's hard.
Well, I've got a question for you, Chad, because after we did our episode, I was reading through some stuff, making sure I was prepped, making sure I was up to date, doing what I do. And somebody made the argument, and I actually thought this would be, because we both agreed Green Goblin's kind of the ultimate villain. There's a lot of people online that argue it's actually Dr. Octopus, that Dr. Octopus is much more of a threat to Spider-Man than Green Goblin.
Really?
I was like,
don't get me wrong.
Wouldn't Doc Ock be the second most?
Doc Ock is one. Doc Ock is my favorite Spider-Man villain and one of my top favorite villains of all time. Even he surpasses Green Goblin for me, and that's kind of fascinating. I mean, Doc Ock has done a lot of crazy stuff to Spider-Man. Well, he's dated Aunt May, for God's sakes.
Well, and I was going to say, and here's their logic behind that, because like I said, I found this argument and I was like, oh, and then since I brought it up, he has beat Spider-Man before. He's one of the only people that has literally beat Spider-Man to an absolute standstill and won. He defeated Spidey in battle and left him. Like, he beat him and he didn't kill him. But he wanted to prove he could beat him. And that was way back in the Amazing Spider-Man #3. He beats him, doesn't kill him, but just leaves him knowing that he can be beat. That's how the comic ends. He's actually the founder of the Sinister Six. So he actually is the one that brought in everybody else. But their argument is he's a master planner, so he can manipulate the situation. Yeah. He's a scientist that rivals Peter Parker's ability and skills. Like you said, he almost married Aunt May.
Likewise, he took over Spider-Man's body.
Likewise, he's not a villain per se. He's done some good. He's helped people.
Yeah.
And so you have that angle. And he's also the one that kind of slung everybody into the multiverse. He was involved in Spider-Man actually going through the multiverse. He helped arrange all of that. So he has literally multidimensional abilities or multidimensional knowledge. And so some people are saying he's much more of a threat if he ever wanted to actually kill Spider-Man.
and that's why I still, and also too, and we'll get into this because we're gonna jump forward a little bit, but I mean, out of all the Spider-Man films that have been made, Alfred Molina's Doc Ock is still, in my opinion, the best villain that's been portrayed in Spider-Man cinema history. Because he's just so compassionate. Because he's a bad man. He's doing bad things, but he's doing it for a cause. Mm-hmm. And he still has that redemption arc, which you don't see in comic book villains. There's never that redemption arc.
Then it's a parallel that you can make for Dr. Octopus. Is he Spider-Man's Mr. Freeze?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah.
But they give him a redemption arc in No Way Home.
I know, and that's what I'm saying. He had a redemption arc in the first one, and then he comes back and has another redemption arc. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just he does bad things. He's a horrible person, but he has emotions and feelings where most villains are one dimensional.
Do you think his big downfall is his ego? I mean, is that really what makes him a villain? Is that he is superior?
He feels like he's superior. He's superior to every human being there is. Yeah, that's what I love about him. He's just arrogant.
Yeah, not like me, because I'm way too good to be arrogant.
Yeah, I mean I kind of would have liked to have seen that played a little bit in the movies. Other than I have this chip that's making me do bad things, and the AI is controlling me. But. Yeah, no, I love that. He's just an arrogant asshole. That's it.
All right. What's next?
So 1991 we had Venom. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to pull a James because we can't talk about Spider-Man without talking about video games.
Oh yeah, there's some good ones and some terrible ones.
And we had the Ultimate Carnage.
Maximum Carnage on
Sega, Genesis, and Super Nintendo. And it just came out and it blew sales away. It was a massive success. I mean, so much so
and it was based on it took directly from the comic storyline Maximum Carnage, where Carnage decides he's going to have a family.
Yeah, and I mean it essentially is just a side scroller punch 'em game. And God, it's exhausting. I still haven't beat it. I don't think I ever will. But I mean, it came out and it just was flying off the shelves, so much so that they released a special edition, like, you could get the red case. Yeah. And everybody wanted the red case Super Nintendo game because it wasn't gray, Joe. It wasn't a gray case.
I get it. I'm
listening.
Do you know here, Joe, Chad, actually both of you, do you know how big of a deal this was?
No.
This was so big of a deal that when Universal Studios first got Marvel, or not first got, early on in that partnership though, and they did their Halloween Halloween Horror Nights.
Yeah.
At Halloween Horror Nights 12, Universal Orlando's Island of Adventure, Marvel Superhero Island, was converted into an entire scare zone dedicated to Maximum Carnage, because it was a horror plot line. So Carnage goes out to acquire everybody. He creates his family. Now, that includes the Doppelganger, which was actually a part of the Infinity War storyline.
Yeah, so full disclosure, again, Doppelganger, I love Doppelganger. It's so cheesy. It's just Spider-Man.
He said Doppelganger, and I was like, oh, it's something different, like a Doppelganger.
No, it's Doppelganger.
Sorry,
no, I know, but I thought
enunciated.
I didn't even hear him say it. So yeah, no, I just love Doppelganger. It's the first Spider-Man comic I ever owned. Was the introduction of Doppelganger and so, Demo Goblin.
I was going to say, which is an actual demon.
Yep.
Has fought Ghost Rider, has fought other supernatural.
I need to get that comic book back. I have so many fond memories of reading that specific comic book over and over again, because I only had 4 comic books.
And then there's Carrion. And so basically Carnage dubs himself the father of these other freaks and nasty, horrible human, and well, not always human beings. And so to fight them, there's a great scene in it, because of course Spider-Man tends not to like Venom. And one of the scenes, as I was reading the storyline, I bought the comics as they came out. There's a great scene where, because Venom doesn't trigger Spider-Man's spider sense. Yeah. There's no way for him to know he's coming. He has no warning whatsoever. And there's a great scene where basically Spider-Man has been beat up. He knows something's going on. And I think he's like soaking in a tub and everything. And there's a knock at the door, and Mary Jane answers it and realizes, holy crap, it's Eddie Brock. And he literally goes, I need to see Peter. And then he passes out. And he's been beat to death too. And that is basically the first time that Venom has to come to Spider-Man and say, we need help. We can't fight this ourselves. And they end up assembling a team that includes the aforementioned Cloak and Dagger. You get Nightwatch, you get Black Cat, you get Captain America, Morbius, Firestar, throwing back in his amazing friends there. And they all have, it takes all of them to try to stop them from everything they're doing, because there's these other ones that they're creating, such as Shriek and all these other kind of spin-offs of this evil team, basically. And the ultimate story arc is, when it comes time, is Spider-Man going to kill Carnage? Is he willing to take that step? And there's even a scene where Firestar goes, you have to stop him. He is not going to stop. You have to be willing to kill. And Captain America goes, you don't want to go down that road, son. And it's that entire thing. It's literally 13 issues building to, when the time comes, is he going to be willing to kill him to make sure this never happens again?
Okay. All right. Now, what's our next part? Where are we at now in the 90s?
Well, I'm going to jump. James, do you have any other comic book information about 1990s? Because I'm going to jump to 1999 if you don't.
Real quick, and let me see. I had a couple notes, and if I can't find them, so there's I won't do the entire story arcs, but a couple things do happen in the 90s of note. We do get, quote unquote, Venom thinks he's killed Spider-Man. That's the Eric Larson cover, and that's when, for a while, Venom did go away till the Maximum Carnage storyline. We do get the Sinister Six coming back. That storyline happens. Harry Osborne officially takes over as the Green Goblin in 1991 on the issue where he does it, but he is completely delusional the entire time. He keeps hearing things. You also get the sense he has a son by that point, that something is also wrong with little Norman Jr. That is hit because he names his son after his father. Obviously, we talked about Carnage. And then you finally get a full story. The full history of Doc Ock comes out in Spider-Man Unlimited 3 for November 1993. You knew how he got his arms, but you actually find out how he's so brilliant, his upbringing. You get his full history. And again, it's been retconned and changed and all of that stuff. But what happens at one point, and it was a big deal at the time, Amazing Spider-Man number 400, April 1995, Aunt May dies. And it's a really, if you don't know, it's much like every other comic. If you don't know, it's like Star Trek 2, right? If you don't know Spock's coming back. And so finally he gets there. He realizes there's nothing he can do. Aunt May is gone. She was kidnapped and he has to rescue her, and they can't save her once he gets her back. And basically her last words to him is, I knew all along. I knew you were Spider-Man. I always worried about you, but I knew if you knew I knew, you wouldn't be able to do what you needed to do. Mm-hmm. And then she dies. And he's obviously, he's inconsolable. And so that was a big point in the 90s. And then there's one other point, which may be interesting to some people. So J.M., is it DeMatteis? I've never actually heard it pronounced. But anyway, he's the one that took Craven the Hunter and made Craven's Last Hunt, which was a huge story. Craven dies at the end, et cetera, et cetera. Well, 11 years after that, they bring him back to try to revamp Mysterio and make him also that next tier character. And I bring it up only because there was Web Spinner Tales of Spider-Man number 1. They bring him back and they tell his entire origin as well, about why does he end up being the villain that he is. And it really does play out with this idea that do these villains have a choice? Once they start down that trail And basically, it's after the first time he commits a crime and gets caught, he wants to go back to being a special effects guy. He wants to go back, but nobody will hire him because he has a criminal record. And then he gets more and more desperate, and he realizes, I have this skill set. I could make my money. And so it's kind of a morality play and a kind of a commentary about what happens to these people Spider-Man stops, or what if Spider-Man just would have stopped him and not turned him in and said, next time you do it, you're going to prison. And so there's some interesting things that they play around with morality wise in the 90s as well. And that's what I got for the 90s.
Okay.
So in 1999, we have to talk about the release, and it only lasted 13 episodes, and I'm grateful for it. Spider-Man Unlimited. Was
not
released.
Linked to the Spider-Man Unlimited comic.
No. So it got released by Saban Entertainment in 1999. And it honestly had fair ratings, but at the same time was also the release of Digimon and Pokemon. And it was quickly overshadowed in Fox Entertainment. So it only lasted 13 episodes, the last ending on a cliffhanger. And like I said, I am not a fan of this. I could go off on the animation style was crappy. The story was boring. If you're not familiar with Spider-Man Unlimited, Joe, Spider-Man is on Earth. He is basically running from the law. Everybody hates him, but he's still trying to be Spider-Man. And there's a shuttle launch. And he notices that Venom and Carnage, again, I can't emphasize how crappy they are drawn in this cartoon. They are just absolute terribly. They're like these big hunched over blobs, just done terribly. And he tries to thwart them, but they end up getting stuck on the rocket ship and landing on a planet called, again, I can't emphasize how terrible the show was, Counter Earth, where their humans are subjugated to a lower existence, and the world is basically ruled by a human-animal hybrid called bestials, who are controlled by somebody called the High Evolutionary. And it just goes on and on. It goes on. It's Peter Parker now having to adjust into a world where he doesn't belong. And he meets for some random reason he meets heroic counterparts of of the Green Goblin and the Vulture on Counter Earth, and he also faces off of like other villains such as Craven the Hunt. It's not a great show. It's only 13 episodes. But it has to be mentioned in terms of Spider-Man.
What year was that again, Chad? 1999. That's what I thought, because shortly thereafter, after a certain film, which I'm sure Joe will talk about.
Yeah, it was basically, you're kind of starting to see this unfortunately was kind of one of those, you're starting to see the death knell of Saturday morning cartoons around this time. So that was one of those that I feel like just got on, and it was just slowly, the Saturday morning cartoons were going away, unfortunately. Yeah. Joe, let's go.
All right. So rights go back and forth many years, and Sony ends up with the rights, and there's a bunch of directors. David Fincher was attached to it at one time.
Yeah.
And Fincher said that he wanted to do the death of Gwen Stacy, or he wanted to do he did not want to do an origin story. And I completely understand, because once again, that's what I love about Homecoming. It's not an origin story. And he just could not, in his head, have a guy getting bit by a spider, and he said he could not make it dramatic. Like, ow. I remember him doing it in the interview.
Yeah.
He's not the only one, but finally Sony courted and got somebody called Sam Raimi. Now, Sam Raimi actually do you know he was still working on The Gift?
No.
They had to pay Paramount X amount of dollars to take him so they could finish up early so he could start on Spider-Man.
Huh.
For you all don't know who Sam Raimi is. Sam Raimi is my favorite director, but he did direct.
And how could you? And he's one of my favorites as well. And how could you not know Sam Raimi?
Well, there's probably maybe somebody who's listening that doesn't know. He directed the first Spider-Man film, and he had already done Darkman, and he had chased after Spider-Man his entire life. There's stories about.
Well, isn't the reason Darkman got made is because they didn't give him the Shadow?
Yeah, he couldn't do the Shadow. And he loves comics and he loves superheroes, and Spider-Man was his favorite. He said it before in interviews. He could have made Spider-Man the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And then we got the Spider-Man movie, and I loved it, or I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was you got to also look at the time. So that scene at the end is really corny. With you mess with one, we're New Yorkers. You mess with us, you mess with all of us. What you don't remember was that we're only about 9 months past September 11th, 2001.
Yeah.
I mean, and there was a whole thing, and
they went back and reshot some of it, remember?
Yeah. And also too, and I wish I had it. I actually had a chance to get it and I opted not to do it. The original poster was just a side picture of Spider-Man's head with the Twin Towers in his eyes.
Yep.
And they took it away. They edited it to have him crawl, which is the one I have. I have the motion of him crawling up the wall, looking up.
I know where you got it.
Yeah, I still love it. Yeah. I unfortunately don't have it up though.
So anyway, back to my kid becoming obsessed and me asking to do this 2-parter about Spider-Man. I've had to rewatch a lot of the movies several times. And I always thought that the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie was fun, but probably revisit it and it wouldn't hold up so well. Guys, I mean, it's kind of got a Swiss watch screenplay. I'm not saying it's got great dialogue, but it bump one. And there's a lot of stuff now that I know that's all built into that movie.
Yeah, it's
throwaway lines all the way through it that are references to 100 different things that I didn't realize watching it over the years till now. I'm older and I've seen all this stuff.
Yeah, it is in my opinion, it's one of those legit comic book movies. It is.
So where do you stand? Go ahead.
No, you go for ask what your question.
Where do you stand with? Although I love the way they in No Way Home how they addressed it with the web shooters.
So that is the one thing that stood from James Cameron's. That was James Cameron's original idea was we're getting rid of the shooters. It's going to be organic, and that was what the studio wanted, if I'm not mistaken. That actually that fell into Sam Raimi's script.
The thing is actually it works for me as a person coming in from the outside.
I like it. I do, because I'm
the purist. I like the old. I think it takes away from how brilliant Peter Parker's.
It does. It takes away from how smart he is, and also takes away drama of him having to refill them.
Right, and that's the big thing is I have to.
But it makes more sense from an outside perspective that they would be organic.
Because I mean that's the thing. Because I mean that's the thing.
I think that's what what you said about the drama, Joe. Real quick, I think that's it. Because literally if you read Spider-Man comics in the 80s, it was at least every third issue. It was all crap I'm falling.
Oh my God. No, the 1994 animated series, every episode was almost, oh no, I'm out of web shooters.
Yeah.
All the time. Web. Build the drama. I do. I'm not.
But
why didn't he, if he had shit that would let him do that, why didn't he patent that and skip college?
So here's what, so I agree. I like that aspect of it, that they made it organic. It never bothered me. And here's my counterpoint to James about this. Spider-Man as a superhero, I want to reiterate, one of my top 10 favorite comic book heroes, but his powers are weird that he gets from a spider. And when they made it organic, I'm like, oh, now they gave him something that he should have gotten from a spider. Not like, because in the comics, James, again, I'm not a comic historian on Spider-Man. Doesn't he get the formula from the bite?
No,
I thought there was like a story arc where he got the ideas and the formula from the actual spider. It changed his brain to where he was able to create the formula. No, he used his scientific. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and by the way, I'm sure there's a storyline out there somewhere. There was at one point where there was a spider totem that was giving him extra power.
Oh my God.
I mean, there's Chad.
By the way, the Madam Web movie is going to suck as much as Morbius did. I don't know what Sony's doing, but go ahead.
Madam Web.
I didn't see Morbius yet.
By the way, I wanted to bring up.
Want to.
This is very relevant to our topic. If you have seen the Spider-Man movie and you have not yet watched our episode where we interview Tim Storms,
I agree.
Yeah,
you need to in the suit.
Yeah, Tim Storms was a stunt. He actually also did. He was a stunt trainer for parts 2 and 3. He actually plays a chainsaw doctor in part 2. look for that scene.
God, that's still one of my favorite interviews.
Tim Storm he also, by the way, is Patrick Stewart's stunt double.
Yeah.
And so he told us a lot of stories about Picard, and also what was the other? He talks about some other shows where he doubled, and also Logan. If you've not heard our Tim Storm interview,
he's
seriously
really
finish this one.
James found him.
Yeah. He's a fascinating human being. Check him out. And he actually just recently started doing conventions. So, but I say all of that to say I wanted to bring this up because Chad mentioned one animated series. I want to bring up another one. Before they did Spider-Man 2, there was Spider-Man, the new animated series.
Is this the one with Neil Patrick Harris?
I was about to say, so it was meant to be what they tried to do after the animated abortion Chad talked about.
Animated abortion.
And we, by the way, James, we'll revisit your conversation about Spider-Man, but go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. We're over an hour again.
I know. I knew we were going to.
So this only ran for 13 episodes as well. It was originally on MTV, but it was meant to be a direct continuation of Spider-Man. Now, here's what's funny about this. Most people loved the plot. They thought the casting was great. They thought everything else was phenomenal. Because, by the way, the voice talent on this was, as Chad said, Neil Patrick Harris, Lisa Loeb, Keith Carradine was J. Jonah Jameson.
Hold on, Lisa Loeb. You say you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to feel
pretty.
Yeah, and by the way, Neil Patrick Harris and Lisa Loeb dated for a long time.
Did Lisa know?
It was shortly. I think, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember the right, it was shortly afterwards where he found out.
About
anyway,
Lisa's affair.
It had, but you know what most people hate about this.
And by the way, guys, we're all close to that. Am I the only one who had a legit crush on Lisa Loeb?
I mean,
I wouldn't call it a crush, but I would. I mean, I can't say.
Oh God, I had a huge crush on Lisa Loeb. I'm not. Yeah,
she ain't Jennifer Connelly.
But originally it was considered a direct follow-up, but it also pulled from the Ultimate Spider-Man comic books, etc., etc. Premiered in 2003, aired for basically a year, 13 episodes of animation. The only problem is most people hated the animation. It was done by cell shading instead of traditional animation.
It's not good. I couldn't watch it.
Most people agreed that's what killed the show. It wasn't the scripts. Everybody really liked it. And then when even though Sam Raimi kind of had agreed, it can be a continuation, Spider-Man 2 came out and changed everything the cartoon said would happen. So there you go.
So
yeah, I mean, we're going over an hour again. It looks like we're going to be doing a 3-parter.
Woohoo.
No, real quick. Can I also bring up another talent that was involved in the voiceover work?
Yeah.
This is really, actually, there's 2 or 3 names I want to mention. Do you know who did the voice of Kirk Connors? Remember, this is MTV's airing a Spider-Man cartoon. See, in this version, the lizard had to burn through the witches.
Oh, Rob Zombie?
Rob Zombie was the voice of Dr. Kirk Connors. Real quick, just FYI, Michael Dorn was Craven the Hunter. Jeffrey Combs was Dr. Zellner, and Clancy Brown was Bodyguard, and Virginia Madsen was the voice of Silver Sable.
So, I do want to revisit the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man, because, like I said, I agree with Joe. It still holds up.
Yeah,
the organic shooters. Sorry, Joe.
No, I was just like, we'll come back to it and talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, the organic shooters, it really doesn't bother me. I'm not a purist. I think it was a nice twist. It didn't bother me, and it honestly led to some interesting parts about part 2. The one thing that I really had a problem with, and I had a problem with it then, and I have a problem with it now, is still the suit, Green Goblin suit, and I hate to be that person.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. I would have liked
Willem Dafoe saves it.
Yeah. And what kills me is you have to see now you can see it in high def.
Yeah, you can see his face.
But you had to look really close through that mesh screen to see his mouth moving and see his facial gestures that he was doing. And then when the shields came up and you could see his eyes, that did it. But that suit, Man, I wish I could. That's the one thing I wish I could correct.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And we see you see the tests. You can YouTube the test screenings of when they were actually going to turn him into a legitimate monster and the robot face, and that wouldn't have worked as well.
Mm-hmm.
I wish there was something, because even when I still remember when they finally released the costumes, they released both Spider-Man and Green Goblins at the same time. It made me excited when I saw the Spider-Man costume, but then when I saw Green Goblin, I'm like, damn, is that what they're doing?
Yeah, he just looks like, in this,
he looks
I
like
can't remember
Ranger.
who he looks like, a Power Ranger. Yeah, that's the problem, and it doesn't work with the rest of the movie.
And if you get a chance, and it's been released, you can find it. There's actually copies of it to sell, and then certificate of authenticity. But Bernie Wrightson, the late great Bernie Wrightson,
yeah, because he went about that in that session we talked when we were
he did concept art going back to Ghostbusters, but he did do some for Raimi's Spider-Man, and you can get online and look at Sam Raimi's, what he did for Sam Raimi to pitch Green Goblin, and it's close to the comics as far as the face and everything, but his hands are different and everything, and I just love Bernie Wrightson's artwork, even if it wasn't linked to Spider-Man. But so if you've never seen that, check it out. It's online.
And we'll get into this in part 3, but that's what I kind of liked about the last Spider-Man film, was how they did his costume. Now, granted, he didn't have the face. It was just literally Norman Osborn but the way they did the costume of him ripped and tattered.
The throwback. It was, it
was beautiful. I was like, that's what it should have been. There should have been some tweaks to make him turn into a goblin. Because I still love that aspect of it. But yeah, I thought that was perfect.
Yeah.
And I was like, they should have done it that way. But yeah, no, that I will never shit on Sam Raimi. Well, maybe a little for part 3, if I don't know if we're getting to that today or not.
And we'll get into it next time.
Actually, and again, you all have heard this, but we'll save it for next episode. I've got a couple things with part 2 that get to me.
Oh my God, really? Because I still think part 2 is the best Spider-Man film.
No, part 2 is the best Lord of the Rings film. Now watch Joe explode.
Two Towers is the best Lord of the Rings film.
It is not.
Yes, it is.
Oh my God, this is one of those
things of that movie.
God,
hold on, wait. Let me make it even worse. Joe, if you start championing the second Hobbit movie one more time, I'm just going to lose it. I'm going to lose it, Joe.
They did have that barrel run. Was that part 2?
Yeah,
I don't remember. I've not went back to watch them.
I haven't either. I've got the ultra
them to my kid.
I've got the ultra special editions, and I've never watched them.
This is a true story, by the way. Real quick, I know we got to wrap up.
They're not into plastic. Not down. We got them out of plastic either.
I've never gotten out of plastic.
Real quick, I've got to share the story. So Joe, as you know, I think you're involved in one of the reasons I have them. I've got the extended cut of the Lord of the Rings, right? I've got all 3 of them.
I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember buying it for you.
I think you bought me one of them. I think you bought me actually 2 Towers, because it's
Joe bought me mine. Yeah.
But anyway, so I was I decided
I'm a really good friend, you fuckholes.
I mean, you didn't buy me the one that came with the statue, though. Let's not oversell.
I have the one with the statue.
Yeah, thanks.
See previous fuckholes.
But anyway, what I was going to say is, I
also didn't get the Necronomicon, the Evil Dead.
I got both of those.
I don't have both. He has Evil Dead too. I just have the ones.
Yeah, Evil Dead 2 laughs at you and mocks you.
Several fuckholes.
But anyway, what I was going to say is, I decided I would, like, my kids.
He did give me the copy of The Fog, though.
Oh.
We have one of those Bowling Green major Corvettes going into fuckholes. Built it up for you. I just wanted to build it up a little bit.
Look it up. Sinkhole. Anyway, but what I was going to say, speaking of extended editions and all that stuff, my kids wanted to watch Lord of the Rings. They're like, what's it about? I'm like, oh, I got it. I made them, and it's been about 2 years ago, so they were a little bit younger. I grabbed the extended edition with Bill the Pony and all that stuff to introduce them to the first movie. That was a mistake.
Oh, dude!
They were like, does this move anytime soon?
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't you get the? And I was like, no, I should have started with theatrical. I made a mistake. They're not ready for it.
It's kind of funny. James and I had the same. And I know we're talking about Spider-Man, and we got a wrap. And we should probably do a whole series on a whole episode on Lord of the Rings.
Well, yeah, before our 6,782 episodes are done.
Yeah, I made the mistake of doing the same thing.
Why did I
was on a roll with my kids and introducing them to movies that I love. And my oldest daughter was sick one day, like really sick. And she goes, Daddy, can I please watch something that you love? I don't know why she said that, but I'm like, okay.
I don't either, because I don't ever hear that.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, we're going to watch Lord of the Rings.
In this movie, Debbie goes to Dallas.
And then she told me to explain her to her Lord of the Rings. And she goes, Daddy, I got to watch that. Please, let's watch that. So I put it in, and like an idiot, I showed her the extended edition, and it didn't even get not
Helm's past Deep. Bilbo's narration of what the fuck a hobbit is.
Yeah, no, not Helm's Deep. Where they formed the fellowship.
Oh,
what's the name of the town?
It's not Ravenwood. It's shit.
But anyway, no, Indiana Jones married her.
They almost made it there, and that's when all the interesting stuff starts. And she's like, Daddy, I can't go anymore. Please watch something else. And she's never gone back to it. And I'm like, I failed as a father. I should have showed her the theatrical version.
If it makes you feel better, that wasn't where you failed as a father.
Yeah, I know.
There's many years ago.
Yeah.
She actually said, I want to watch something way better than this, like Willow.
And, since you're not both complete sink fuckholes, Chad did give me that cool Gandalf fighting the Balrog.
Yeah.
That my son now takes down every 2 months to fight with, and I end up inevitably having to find that little damn sword.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. For years, 20 years, it's been on a shelf, not bothered.
That is a cool thing, though.
It's a cool thing, especially, and I didn't know that it'd be a second gift later when he's reenacting it with the scene.
Yeah.
You shall not pass.
God, I remember
That's the only part he's watched, by the way. He just wanted to watch that.
My poor sick daughter in bed. I'm like, but honey, we haven't got to the Balrog yet. I'm like, you're going to love it if you get to the bell or the cave troll.
They have a cave troll.
And she's like, Daddy, I can't do it. I'm like, oh,
did you make sure that you looked at your daughter in her state of illness and see, you see, a cave troll is what Superman has to fight. And they call it Doomsday, but we all know that's the same cave troll. He was just out of work.
I still can't. I see all these polls about fucking Zack Snyder. Still pisses me off. Anyway, let's get to Spider-Man so we can wrap this up.
Well, so I think that's a good point out, though. I think this is a good way to kind of wrap up, because Spider-Man at this point has went full circle. We finally get a big budget.
Thankfully, Zack Snyder has never touched him.
We get a big budget, hugely successful launch to Spider-Man. I mean, there had been Marvel superhero films. Everybody forgets or doesn't talk about it as much. I mean, Blade was a success. So it's not that the first success Marvel had on the silver screen was Spider-Man, but Spider-Man did come along and outdid expectations.
Well, it's over $400 million. It was the biggest damn movie of the year.
Yeah.
And how could it not be with a good, sweet Nickelback tune?
I'm so high. I'm in heaven.
Actually, it wasn't Nickelback, right? It was just Chad Kroeger.
No, it was just Chad Kroeger.
Oh, I thought it was actually Nickelback. I didn't know it was Chad.
No, it was just Chad Kroeger and another dude.
Oh.
So Chad, I'm so high. I can never.
Oh God! I will not crap on Nickelback. I won't crap on Nickelback, but I've never been a fan. And then that was their chosen soundtrack song, and I was like, God, I couldn't even watch the music video.
But it does have Macy Gray in the middle of it singing.
That's another one of my problems with the movie is I hate that. I don't like that scene.
I'm okay with it, but I like Macy Gray's other song.
Yeah, I like Macy Gray.
There we go.
But anyway, so I think that's a good way to wrap it up, though, because we do have successful. We now Spider-Man has been in all franchises except, and we'll talk about this for next episode. Of course, he hasn't made it yet to Broadway. Tune in next time.
Wait, there's a twist.
Tune in next time. I want to be a producer of a big show on Broadway.
I sit here and talk about how we'll end after this. I was going to talk about at the beginning of the episode how I know I'm getting old because I can't stand the Weeknd. I hate that. I can't stand any of his songs. And that's how I know I'm getting old.
I don't even mind the Weeknd.
I can't stand his.
I love the Weeknd. Everybody's searching for the Weeknd.
But yeah, no, but I can never complain because we had Nickelback. Goodbye, everybody.